Let me describe a feeling you might know. You did the responsible thing and opened an investment account. You set up an automatic transfer every month, and you've kept it going for a few years now without missing a single one. The whole time you were promised that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world, the magic snowball that turns small money into a fortune. So one day you log in to check on the magic, you look at the balance, and the only thought in your head is this it? The growth is tiny. After years of discipline, the amount your money actually earned on its own is almost embarrassing. And quietly, in the back of your mind, a dangerous little thought starts forming. Maybe this whole compounding thing is overblown. Maybe it doesn't really work for someone like me. Here's what I need you to understand, and it's the reason for this whole video. That feeling is not in your head. There really is a level of monthly investing below which compound interest, for all practical purposes, is useless to you. It will technically work, the math will do its thing, and at the end of 30 years, you will still have a number too small to change your life in any way that matters. Most people who feel that is this it feeling reach the wrong conclusion about why. And the wrong conclusion costs them more than almost any other mistake in personal finance. So today, I'm going to show you exactly where that useless line sits, why your money is stuck below it, and the one thing that actually pulls you above it. And I promise you, it is not what the gurus are selling. My name is Tom. This channel is real personal finance for normal people. No motivational fluff about the magic of compounding, no fantasy returns, just what the math actually does over time. And the math today is going to be honest with you in a way those hockey stick charts never are. If that's what you want, hit subscribe and stay with me because by the end you'll be able to figure out your own number in about 60 seconds. Let me start by fixing the picture of compounding in your head, because the snowball image is part of the problem. Forget the snowball. The cleaner way to understand compounding is doublings. Your money invested in a normal broad stock fund has historically grown about 7% a year after you strip out inflation. That 7% is a long-run average, not a promise, and the future could easily come in lower, so I'm using it as a reasonable middle estimate, not a guarantee. And here's the useful part. At about 7%, your money doubles roughly every 10 years. That's the whole engine. Not a smooth curve, but a series of doublings, one about every decade. So a 30-year investing life gives you about 3 doublings. Your money roughly doubles, then doubles again, then doubles one more time, ending up around 7 to 8 times what you started with. Now, here's the thing about doublings that nobody sits you down and explains. All the drama is in the last one. Picture folding a piece of paper. You fold it once, it's 2 sheets thick. Fold it again, 4. Keep going. For the first dozen folds, the thickness is still almost nothing. You can barely tell it's growing. It feels exactly like that boring investment account. But because every fold doubles what came before, the back end gets violent. A single sheet of paper folded 40-some times, if you could actually do it, would reach the moon. The early folds look like nothing, and the late folds are astronomical. And it's the identical act every time. Your money does the same thing. The doubling that takes your pile from $250,000 to $500,000 adds $250,000 in one move, which is as much as everything you had managed to build up to that point combined. That last doubling is where the magic everyone talks about actually lives. Watch it happen with one pile, and to keep it clean, picture a chunk of money just sitting there doubling with nothing new added. Say a base has grown to $125,000. The first doubling takes it to $250,000, so it added $125,000 over about a decade. Fine, the next doubling takes it from $250,000 to $500,000, adding $250,000. The last one takes it to $1 million, adding a full $500,000 in that final stretch alone. Same money, same 7%, same boring fun the entire time. The last 10 years did more than the first 20 combined. Nothing changed except that the pile was finally big enough for a doubling to mean something. And this is exactly why people quit right before it gets good. The early years feel like failure because the doublings are small and our brains read small as broken. People bail in year 4 or 5 convinced the strategy is busted, when the truth is the strategy was working perfectly and they walked out of the theater 20 minutes before the payoff. Which brings us to the trap and to the answer to the question in the title. Your final wealth comes down to 2 things multiplied together. how many doublings you get, and how big the pile is that's doing the doubling. Time gives you the number of doublings. But the size of the base, the pile that's actually doubling, that comes almost entirely from how much you put in. And here's the cruel little secret the charts hide from you. If your base is too small, you can complete every single doubling that a human lifetime allows, and the final number will still be too small to matter. The compounding didn't fail. It did its job perfectly. It took your money and grew it 7 or 8 times over. It's just that 7 times a tiny number is still a small number. That is the precise, honest truth behind the scary title. Compounding is never actually useless in the mathematical sense. It's useless in the sense that it cannot turn a base that's too small into a number that changes your life, no matter how much time you give it. Let me put real figures on this so it stops being abstract, and these are honest figures, adjusted for inflation. So every number I say is in today's money, what it would actually buy you when you get there. Say you invest $50 a month, you never miss, you do it perfectly for 30 years. At the end, your pile is about $61,000. Now, $61,000 from putting in $50 a month does sound like the magic worked, and in a way it did. Your money grew more than 7-fold. But watch what that pile actually does for you. The safe amount you can pull from a nest egg each year is about 4%. And 4% of $61,000 is roughly $2,400 a year. That's $200 a month. 30 years of perfect unbroken discipline bought you a phone bill. Bump it to $100 a month, and after 30 years you've got around $122,000, which throws off about $400 a month. Better, but let's be real about what that is. The average American household spends about $6,500 a month to live. So $400 of investment income isn't a retirement, it's a nice little cushion at best. This is the useless zone, and it's real, and it sits roughly anywhere below a couple $100 a month of investing. Sit with how brutal that is for a second, because nobody says it out loud. 30 years is most of a working life. If you start at 35, that's you contributing faithfully until 65 every single month. To every recession and every temptation to quit, the picture of discipline. And at $50 a month, the reward for all of it is a pile that hands you $200 a month to live on. The average household spends that much on food in about a week. You did everything the responsible adult voice told you to do for 3 decades, and compounding handed you a number that can't cover a single utility bill. That's not because compounding betrayed you. It's because you fed it a base so small that even multiplying it by 7.5 couldn't rescue the result. The engine was never the problem, the fuel was. So where does it stop being useless and start being life-changing? Watch how fast it turns once you push the base up. Push it to $300 a month, and 30 years gets you to around $66,000, which is $1,200 a month of income. $400 a month crosses roughly $500,000 in today's money. And now you're pulling about $1,600 a month. Get yourself to $500 a month, and you're looking at about $1,610,000 and just over $2,000 a month, which, stacked on top of an ordinary Social Security check, is an actual retirement. Look at what just happened there. Going from $50 to $500 a month is 10 times the contribution, but the monthly income it produces went from a useless $200 to a real $2,000. It didn't grow 10 times. The jump from the useless zone to the life-changing zone is steeper than the contribution increase, because once the base clears a certain size, that final doubling is working on a number big enough to land hard. The line where compounding wakes up and starts genuinely changing your future sits somewhere around a few $100s a month. And below it you can do everything right for 30 years and still arrive with almost nothing that matters. Quick favor before the most important part. I'm curious where everybody actually is on this, so drop a comment and tell me roughly how much you invest in a month right now. No judgment. I started lower than I'd like to admit, and I'll tell you that story in a minute. Now here's the reversal. The part that separates the people who break through from the people who stay stuck forever. When you feel that useless feeling, when the balance is depressing and the growth is invisible, your brain makes a diagnosis. And almost everyone makes the same wrong one. You decide the problem is your return rate. 7% feels too slow. So you start looking for something that grows faster. A hot stock, a clever fund, a guy with a newsletter. Off you go, hunting for a bigger number. And that instinct, that exact instinct, is the most expensive mistake in this entire topic because you're reaching for the wrong lever. Here's why it's the wrong lever. You're trying to make the doublings happen faster, but your money already doubles about every decade on autopilot. And to meaningfully beat that, you'd need returns that almost nobody on Earth sustains for a lifetime. Chasing them means taking wild risks. And reaching for those returns usually ends with you panicking and doing something dumb at the worst moment. So the higher number you were chasing turns into a lower number in real life. Meanwhile, there's another lever sitting right next to you that you completely control, and it's the size of the base. You can't reliably make your money double faster, but you can absolutely make the thing that's doubling bigger. And the math rewards that move enormously, especially when you do it early. Let me show you the early part, because it's the most underrated fact in investing. $1 you put in today, over a 30-year horizon, grows to about $7.60. $1 you put in 25 years from now, near the end, only has time to grow to about $1.40. So $1 invested today does the work of more than $5 invested late in the game. Read that again. Your early dollars are worth roughly 5 times your late dollars. Because they're the only ones that get to ride all the doublings, the dollar you add at the start gets 3 doublings. The dollar you add near the end gets none. So when you raise your contribution, you're not just adding money, you're adding the most powerful, most doublings dollars you will ever own. That is the lever, not the rate. The base pushed up as early as you possibly can. I learned this the slow and stupid way. When I started out, I set up a tiny automatic contribution, something almost symbolic. And I told myself the important thing was just building the habit, that I'd ramp it up later when I was making more. And I left it at that token amount for years. I felt responsible because I was investing it all. But those were the single most expensive years of my financial life. Because those early dollars were the ones with 3 doublings still ahead of them. And I was feeding the engine a trickle. The habit was real, but the habit alone was never going to clear the line. I had confused starting with finishing. When I finally did the math the way I just showed you, and saw that the contributions I was so proud of were going to turn into a number that wouldn't move the needle, it genuinely rattled me. The fix wasn't a better fund or a hotter stock, the things I'd been quietly fantasizing about. The fix was embarrassingly boring. I just raised the number and then raised it again every time I got a raise, and the whole trajectory of where I'd end up changed without me touching the investments at all. The person I think about who got this right is my neighbor Helen. Helen was a school librarian her whole career. She never had a big salary, not even close, and she's not the type who reads market news or picks stocks. By every assumption our culture makes, Helen should have retired with almost nothing. Instead, she retired more comfortably than people who out-earned her 2-to-1 their entire lives. When you look at how, it's almost annoying how simple it is. Helen started early in her 20s, and she pushed her contribution up to a real number as soon as she could and then kept it there for decades. On a librarian's income, she didn't have a clever fund and she never caught some rocket stock. What she did was get a big enough base into the engine early enough that it had time for every doubling to run. Her money wasn't smarter than anyone else's, it just had a base worth doubling and a long time to do it. The people who out-earned her stayed below the line for years because they treated investing as whatever was left over at the end of the month, and leftover money is always small. Helen treated her contribution as the bills she paid first. That single difference on a smaller income beat them. So here is what's actually due with all of this, and it's almost insultingly simple. Stop obsessing over the rate, the fund, the perfect pick, all the loud stuff that barely moves your outcome while your base is small. Instead, do 2 things. First, get an honest read on where you are. Take whatever you currently invest each month, and remember that over 30 years it's going to turn into roughly 7 or 8 times the total you put in. If that final number, and the income it would actually produce at 4%, doesn't change your life, then you are below the line and no return rate is going to rescue you. Second, raise the base and do it now, not someday. Every month you wait, you're not losing a little money. You're spending your most valuable dollars, the ones with the most doublings left, on nothing. You don't have to leap from 50 to 500 overnight, but you do have to start climbing today. Because the dollars you add this year are worth several times the dollars you'll add a decade from now. And there's a dead simple way to climb without it ever hurting. Every time more money shows up in your life, a raise, a bonus, a tax refund, a loan you finally finish paying off, move a chunk of it straight into your contribution before your lifestyle gets its hands on it. That's the whole trick. New money has no owner for about a week, and whoever claims it first, your investments or your spending, keeps it. If you wait, your spending always wins, because a slightly nicer life is the easiest thing in the world to get used to. So you decide in advance today that the next time your income bumps up, the contribution bumps up with it. Do that a few times over a career and you'll cross the line almost without noticing. No budgeting misery required. Let me be clear about one thing so nobody hears the wrong message. Starting small is fine. Starting small is good. $50 a month is genuinely better than zero, and getting the habit running is a real victory. The lie isn't start small. The lie is the silent assumption that start small means stay small forever. It was only ever supposed to mean lower the bar to get going, open the account, build the muscle, prove to yourself you can do it, and then climb as fast as your life will allow, because the clock on those precious early doublings is already running. Compound interest is not magic, and it is not useless. It's just doublings, and doublings need two things to change your life. They need enough time, which is why you start now, and they need a base big enough that 7 or 8 times it is actually a number worth having, which is why you push your contribution up and refuse to leave it at a trickle. The people who win at this aren't smarter than you, and they didn't find a secret. They just got a real base into the engine early and let the doublings do the rest. You can be one of them, starting with one change this week. If this finally made compounding make sense, go watch my video on what happens after you cross that threshold, when your money starts earning more in a year than you can save. Because that's the genuinely fun part of this story. Drop a comment telling me what you invest a month right now. Hit subscribe so the next one finds you, and I'll see you in the next video.